Hello, welcome back to How to D&D. Today, it's all about the rules, the basic rules of Dungeons & Dragons 5e. This is a weekly class or program that I run with the intention of helping more people play the game of Dungeons & Dragons. And obviously, we are focusing on 5e, so 5e will be the focus, of course. It's the newest version of the game currently. I'm going to put up a poll and ask you a question, and feel free to take part in that question. This class will involve maps, miniatures, and dice. There is demonstration involved for sure. What you'll also find is I'm going to just go over to my webcam and my head cam, should I say. My webcam, that's my head cam. I'm going to be definitely covering a lot of material that's around the basics of the game rather than the complicated aspects of the game. There are more complicated aspects of the game. I'm not going to be covering them today in my presentation. So I have a slideshow that I run. For those of you who have seen it before, feel free to just put into the comments section in the live chat your questions. If you have questions you would like to ask, just ask them now and I'll come back to them. Probably the best way to deal with me handling questions is be very specific and hashtag question, please, is probably going to be the best way. Okay, if you go hashtag question, then I can pick out your questions as I go. So I'm going to do a slideshow. I'll go back to Q&A, answer your questions as best I can, and you can give feedback and so forth at that point. And then we'll go into some demonstration. So I'll demonstrate some of the aspects that I've explained. Okay, so I've done all the preamble. We know what we're dealing with. Let's get into the business of covering the topic for today. And I believe I have just about... Oh, where is that? Where's it gone? It's here. It's somewhere. There we are. There we are. Okay, over we come. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. We could talk about rock climbing, but probably not a topic for today. No, it's all about the Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules. This is Lesson 1, Basic Game Mechanics, the absolute rudimentary basics of the game. If you are struggling with them, we're going to help you with that today. So my overview for today is I'm going to talk about creature ability scores for characters and monsters. I'm going to talk about making an ability check, skill checks, saving throws, attack rolls, DC or difficulty class, what is a contest, how do they work. I'm going to talk about AC or armor class, and I'm going to talk about advantage and disadvantage and how it works in terms of playing it in 5e. So those are the things I'm going to cover today. My purpose whenever I do this is I have some objectives. I'm going to explain everything. I'm going to demonstrate as much as I possibly can, and I want you to participate with me. Okay, so what I need you to do is ask me questions so that I can respond, or ask me for things you want me to demonstrate, and I'll do my very best to do that. That is the intention for today. D&D Beyond has the basic game mechanics for Dungeons & Dragons 5e for free on their website, so you can sign up to D&D Beyond for nothing, and you can then access the rules, the basic rules, for free. Doesn't cost you a thing. And there are websites available too that will allow you to download a PDF of the basic rules if you need to have a PDF and you can't run online. That won't work for you. That's fine. There is ways around dealing with that. So creature ability scores. What do they look like? How do they work? So the core of your Dungeons & Dragons 5e game, and in fact Dungeons & Dragons full stop, is that it revolves around 6 ability scores, okay? Your 6 abilities provide a quick description of every creature's physical and mental characteristics, and the whole game mechanics are based on the ability scores when you're trying to do something. So I'm going to use the analogy of the tomato. For those of you who are unaware, you're about to figure out what I mean. Okay. The first one, strength. This measures your physical power, your physical strength, and that would be represented by a character's ability to crush a tomato in their hand. Like that's essentially what it's measuring and indicating. Dexterity is a measurement, or it is measuring and indicating your agility. So this would be a character's ability to avoid being hit by a tomato that's thrown at them. Constitution measures your endurance and resistance in many respects, to certain things, that is. A character's ability, say, to eat a rotten tomato and not get sick. If you can do that, you've got a good high constitution. Intelligence. This is measuring your reasoning and your memory, and that's what it's indicating. So a character's ability to know that a tomato is a fruit would be an indication of intelligence. And then wisdom is a measure of your perception and insight. How wise are you? How smart are you really? And this is a character's ability to understand that the tomato doesn't go into the fruit salad. Okay. Charisma, the last one, is a measure of your force of personality. Not necessarily how pretty you look, but it's force of personality. So this would be a character's ability to sell a rotten tomato to a customer without them throwing it back at them. Essentially, that's what we're looking at here. Okay? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the core dice mechanics for Dungeons and Dragons. They all revolve around essentially the same thing. So you don't need to get too upset and worried about any of this, but they all revolve around essentially the same concept. And so I guess the first thing to discuss is, what does that first check look like? What does the ability check look like in your game when you're playing the game? Well, an ability check, this allows you to, basically an ability check allows an action to be taken that has a chance of failure. So you don't make an ability check unless there's a chance of failing this check, okay? And if you want to find more information on that, you will have to refer to page 174 of the Player's Handbook. The ability check is a test of a character's or a monster's effort to overcome a challenge or some sort of threat. There are 6 abilities, as I just mentioned: strength, dexterity, intelligence, constitution, wisdom, and charisma. These are the most important mechanics in the game, and they fill in all the gaps when you don't know what to do. And so how do you figure out how to make an ability check? It's very simple. It will be the result of adding your ability modifier to a 20-sided dice roll. And whatever you get out the other end, that is your ability check. Okay? Now, if we were to feed on from the abilities, there's another thing we need to discuss, and that is the skill check. Skills or skill checks are a specialized ability check that allows an action that also has a chance for failure, but might include some training. So often a skill is just more defined from the ability check. So as I said, specialized. And that means we bring in things like proficiency or training. And if you look at page 174 of the Player's Handbook, you'll see a section on this. The skill check is a test of a character or a monster's specific aspect of their abilities to overcome a challenge. So it's the same, it's very, very similar to the ability check, but it's more defined, okay? And there are 18 different skills that you can utilize in the game. And those are sort of broken up into the following. We have the acrobatics check, and this is a skill check, and this is based on dexterity. This is your ability to sort of tumble or do a somersault or to walk along a tightrope. So that's acrobatics. Animal handling is related to wisdom, and this is your ability to affect the interaction between an animal and yourself. Arcana is based off intelligence, and this is represented by basically your knowledge of magic. Okay, anything related to magic, it's basically that, and it is a knowledge rather than necessarily a skill where you're doing something, but it can be if the dungeon master or you want it to be. Athletics is related to strength, and this is your ability to do something, say lifting something heavy would be athletics. Okay, something like jumping over a gap would be athletics, or climbing up a rope or a rock wall, that would be athletics. Deception, this is based on charisma, so it's related to that, and this is your ability to convince somebody that you're telling the truth when you're not. So you tell a lie, and you're trying to pass off that lie as the truth, and it's not in fact the truth at all. History is related to intelligence, and this is where you recall information about something that happened in the past. Basically, you're the history buff at this point. Insight is related to wisdom, and this is where you're trying to look at a situation. It is often related to how creatures interact with each other. So you are trying to determine if you are able to spot, say, somebody lying, or can you figure out from their body language that they're not actually in a good space, and maybe they're upset and you want to determine that, or maybe from your insight you're going to determine that whoever's telling a lie is in fact telling a lie. And how would you determine this? Their eyes are dropping down, they're not looking you straight in the eye, they're sweating, they've got a red face, they're fidgeting, things like that. Intimidation, this is related to charisma. This is where you try to do something, so you stand over somebody and you try to scare them. So whether you shout at them or stand right up in their face, or you lift up a fist and threaten to smack them in the face, you're trying to intimidate and scare them. You might say something to them that's terrifying, or might put them off. Investigation is related to intelligence, and this is your ability to not necessarily find clues, but take the clues that you find and, like Sherlock Holmes, deduct that the scrapes on the floor must indicate here that something like the wall or a section has been moving, so there might be a secret door here. It's deduction, okay? All right, so those are those skills, but there are more. I've got a second list. Medicine is related to wisdom, and this is where we are trying to, you're like the forensic scientist now, okay? Your ability is to, is this person poisoned? Are they suffering from some sort of disease? What sort of disease is it? If you find a body and you want to figure out how long they've been dead or how they died, then medicine, your forensic abilities. Nature is related to intelligence, and this is your knowledge of flora and fauna in the wild, anything related to nature that isn't sort of supernatural or fantastical. Perception is related to wisdom, and this is your ability to use your senses to detect something. So maybe we are measuring or trying to figure out, can you see something with your eyes? Can you hear something with your ears? Can you smell something with your nose? Can you taste something with your tongue? Or can you feel something when you touch something? Can you feel vibrations in the ground? That would be related to perception. And then performance is related to charisma, and this is, say, your ability to sing a song, put on a dance, act in a play or a performance of some kind, that sort of thing. Persuasion is related to charisma as well, and this is more your ability not necessarily to deceive somebody, but to convince them that your approach and your rationale makes sense and that they should agree with what you're doing, or fall in line with you in some way. So it's persuasion. You're trying to convince them to do something they wouldn't have normally have done, but you're not trying to do it in the way where you would tell a lie and deceive them. Okay, next one is religion related to intelligence, and this is your knowledge of, say, deities, rituals, religious rituals, some sort of holy symbol. If you're trying to identify a holy symbol, you might be using that sort of thing. Sleight of hand is related to dexterity, and this is your ability to do something without really being seen. So maybe you're picking a pocket, maybe you're actually going to engage in a sort of putting your hand into a mechanism, and without breaking anything, pull a piece of a cog out of a clock, or maybe you're even going to be picking a lock. Sleight of hand to a large extent would be related to this. Stealth. Stealth is related to dexterity. This is your ability to move quietly, unseen, and silently, okay, through a location, or sneak up on somebody, or move past a guard without being detected. Survival is related to wisdom, and this is your ability to understand the best place to make a camp, or figure out what the tracks on the ground that you find are related to. These are bear tracks we've found on the ground. They're going in a particular direction. They're going north. They appear to be moving at a certain speed based on how far apart the footprints are, that sort of thing. Survival is very much around tracking. It might even be related to if you want to decide to actually set up a trap, a snare of some kind, and just finding a camp that's safe. So it's all about survival aspects. So you've got a pretty good idea that this is actually just giving you a bit more guidance with regard to the ability checks. So how do we actually perform a skill check? Fortunately for you, it's relatively simple. It's the same process that we used before, okay? And now the first thing we've got to discern is how do we actually figure out the skill modifier? So your skill modifier is calculated the following way. You're going to determine it by, it's either going to be your ability modifier that's related to your skill that you're using, okay? Or it's your ability modifier plus your proficiency bonus if the character is trained or proficient in this skill. If you're not trained or proficient, you don't add your proficiency bonus. So when we make that check, your skill check is the result of adding your skill modifier to a 20-sided dice roll. And that will be compared to a DC, which I will talk about fairly shortly. The same with your ability checks. Okay, so we've covered a lot of stuff, but we're not finished. We have the saving throw, creature saving throws. What are they all about? How do they work? There are 6 of them to discuss, so I'm going to discuss them and try to give you all the information that you need in this case. Saving throw and dice mechanics, they revolve around resisting something like a spell, a trap, a poison, a disease, a hazard, or even a harmful force of some kind. And if you refer to page 179 of the Player's Handbook, you'll find most of the information you need there. A saving throw is an automatic or forced attempt to resist a threat. So, in other words, it's something you do automatically as part of your body's nature, or it's forced because you have to try to resist it in some way. Where a character or a monster doesn't really have a choice. Many times, I know a lot of people will say, can I choose to not make the saving throw? Usually, no. Usually you have to make the saving throw because it's an automatic response. It's built into your body, okay? There are 6 saving throws related to the abilities. There is strength, dexterity, intelligence, constitution, wisdom, and charisma. Wow, that's quite a lot. So, what do these each look like? How would they be represented in our world that we're playing in? Well, you would make a strength saving throw to stop being pushed by a strong wind. That would be an example of using a strength saving throw. If we might make a dexterity saving throw to avoid being hit by a rolling boulder trap. Okay, so that would be something that would be suitable for that. A constitution saving throw would be made to resist the poison laced in a drink that you've just swallowed. An intelligence saving throw is basically would be involved in disbelieving an illusion created by magic. A wisdom saving throw would be an example would be resisting being charmed by a mermaid when they sing their song. And a charisma saving throw, a good example is this when you have to avoid being possessed by a ghost because a ghost tries to enter your body with their spirit and take control, and so you try to resist that effect. So there's a lot going on here, and again, we need to look at how do we actually calculate our saving throw. It's nice and simple. It follows very much the same pattern as before, but we also need to determine what is our saving throw modifier, because there's a modifier, a number that we will add to a dice roll. So saving throws are determined by whatever your ability modifier is, but there is an exception. In some cases, you'll be calculating your ability modifier, okay, your skill, your saving throw modifier will be determined by calculating it by adding your ability modifier to your proficiency bonus. So saving throw modifier is going to be equal to your ability modifier plus your proficiency bonus if the character is trained in that saving throw or proficient in that saving throw. Now, when I say trained, in some cases that doesn't make a lot of sense. Proficiency probably is a better representation of this, but there will be some saving throws where it would make sense that you might actually be trained to actually be better at performing that saving throw than other characters. A saving throw is determined the following way. It is the result of adding your saving throw modifier to a 20-sided dice roll, and whatever you get as the result is then compared to a DC, okay, or difficulty class to determine whether you are successful or whether you have failed. Okay, let's deal with creature attack rolls and what they're all about. Attack rolls are used to hit a creature in combat, and if you want information on that, it's on page 193 to 195 of the Player's Handbook. An attack roll represents a character's or a monster's attempt to hit successfully with significant force to reduce hit points. Okay? Hit points are not your physical health. They are just a representation, abstract. Okay? So whatever you're striking with your blow has to hit with significant force to actually reduce hit points. And this could be through a ranged weapon attack. It could be a close quarter attack with a weapon. It might be a ranged spell, a melee weapon, a melee spell that's at close quarters, an unarmed strike where you punch and kick. Claws, teeth, or natural body parts might be involved in this situation. So that's your attack roll. It's probably one of the most common dice rolls you'll be making in the game when you are involved in a battle or combat. So how do we go about making an attack roll, and how do we figure out what our attack roll is? Well, again, your attack roll modifier, okay, the bonus that you will use is going to be calculated by adding your ability modifier related to that type of attack to your proficiency bonus if the character is trained or proficient in that attack or type of assault, okay? If you're not proficient or trained in that particular type of attack, then you don't add your proficiency bonus. This will not come up very often because most of the time the only thing you will ever use are things that you are proficient with. Next, how do we actually make the attack roll? Very simple. It is the result of adding your attack modifier or your attack bonus to a 20-sided dice roll. Okay. Once we get the final result of that, we will compare it with the armor class or AC of the monster or creature you're trying to strike. That's how it works. So now we need to talk about some of the other aspects, and that is really we've gone over what things are, but we haven't actually told you how to resolve stuff. So let's talk about how to resolve some of the dice mechanics in the game. The first one is how to resolve dice mechanics with regard to something like an ability check or a skill check or a saving throw. These are all lumped together, and how they work is simple. Whatever you get for your ability check, your skill check, or your saving throw, you compare it to the difficulty class or DC. Okay? Any ability check, skill check, or saving throw that is equal to or greater than the DC or difficulty class is successful. Okay? If you get equal to or greater than, you succeed. If you get less than the DC, it is a failure. Typical difficulty classes or DCs are the following. 5 would be very easy as a task, 10 would be easy, 15 would be a medium difficulty, 20 would be hard, 25 is very hard, 30 is nearly impossible, and the range does not extend beyond that. Okay, because if you do anything higher than the 30, you're dealing with things that are in fact impossible to perform. You'll probably find you will never see a DC 5 involved in your games, and I would say that many dungeon masters will never involve a DC 10. You will find them in pre-made adventures by Wizards of the Coast, but you certainly won't find them in my game. But that's beside the point. That's the scale, 5 through to 30. Okay, so that's always good to know. There's another type of check, more complicated than the one I've just described, but also very useful. And the best way to describe this and illustrate it is the arm wrestling process, okay? And this is basically our contest. This is when an ability check or a skill check can be resolved in some situations involving what is called a contest. This is where you get two different ability or skill checks and they're going to work against each other. Success is only achieved when one individual gets greater than the other person's check. So as a player, okay, if you're doing this, say you are arm wrestling a Minotaur in the bar, to be successful against the Minotaur, your strength check or your athletics check must be greater than the Minotaur's ability check, strength check, or athletics check in this case. That's what we're trying to work with in this case. That's what you're doing. If you can't do that and you get equal to, right? Well, if you get equal to, then there's no change. It's a stalemate. And you may need to continue rolling dice to determine the final result of the contest. If you get less than whatever your competitor has, if you get less than the Minotaur in this case, then you will fail and the Minotaur will win the arm wrestling contest. Contests can be performed in many different ways, not just an arm wrestling situation. Contests are often dice roll mechanics around stealth and perception. We would have perception being used and contested by stealth. Probably the easiest one, most common one you'll come across. So that is the contest. There is another one that you're going to use a lot, and that is in fact the armor class. Armor class is really about combat. So this is where you make an attack roll, you compare the result to the target or creature's armor class or AC, and any attack roll that is equal to or greater than the target's armor class is a hit. If you get less than the armor class, it is a miss. So you need to get equal to or greater than the armor class to actually connect, okay, successfully, to do enough to actually reduce their hit points. If you get less than the armor class, you miss. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. How do we actually figure out how to make that attack roll? Well, as it happens, again, what we're going to do is we're going to make our attack roll, and you're going to take that and you're going to compare it to the armor class. Once you've done the attack roll, you need to roll the appropriate damage for that attack and apply any special effects, if any. And that's it. That's really how you go about making an attack in Dungeons and Dragons. Some attacks will be involving a spell, some will involve magic. In any case, that's the basics. Now, there is a very good mechanic in the game that involves rolling more than one d20 or more than one 20-sided dice. Okay? And this is advantage and disadvantage. I'm going to talk about advantage first. Advantage, this dice mechanic is nice and simple. When you have advantage, okay, and the Dungeon Master will usually tell you if you have advantage, or if you have a special ability that grants you advantage, then that's when you would use it. You will roll two 20-sided dice and use the highest roll of the two dice rolls. That's if you have advantage on the ability check, saving throw, or attack roll, okay? Even a skill check can have advantage on it. Any dice roll that involves a 20-sided dice can have advantage on it, okay, potentially. So that's advantage. Now, one of the things about advantage is if you have more than one application of advantage on the same dice roll, you don't get to roll more than two dice. You only get to ever roll two dice. You only add one dice if you had advantage. So if you get advantage for not being seen when you make your attack because you're invisible, but you also get advantage because you have a special ability, you don't get to have double advantage. You only apply it, it doesn't stack. Advantage doesn't stack. All right, so now let's talk about disadvantage. Disadvantage, again, involves rolling two dice, but it's a slightly different mechanic. You roll two 20-sided dice and you use the lower of the two rolls. This is when you have disadvantage. Okay, it's not a great thing to have, but it applies to ability checks, skill checks, saving throws, and attack rolls. Again, if you have disadvantage, it does not stack. So if you have more than one situation that gives you disadvantage, you only ever roll one other dice. Okay, you'll only ever be rolling two dice. You do not roll 3 or 4 dice and take the lowest result. It doesn't work that way. Another thing to understand is if you have advantage on your on a 20-sided dice roll, but you also have disadvantage on that 20-sided dice roll, they cancel each other out. Okay, you don't worry about how many times you had advantage and how many times you had disadvantage, and then see which one has the the highest number of advantages and disadvantages. If you have advantage applied to a dice roll, okay, whether there's one application or more, doesn't matter. Remember, it doesn't stack. And you also have disadvantage. They cancel each other out. It's a flat roll. You roll one dice. That's it. Nothing more. So those are the basics in terms of dice mechanics for Dungeons and Dragons. But like with everything I do, I always want to give out some miscellaneous recommendations. And in this case, I'm probably going to do it again because I always do. If you are unsure what to do with your game mechanics, then just ask the character to roll a 20-sided dice. Whenever you are unsure what to do, just ask them to roll a 20-sided dice. Okay? If there's any chance of success or failure, that's what you do. Then all you're going to do is you're going to get them to add that result to the ability modifier that you think relates in some way to the action that they're trying to perform, whether it's a creature, a monster, or a character. That is the easiest way to get around any problems you have at the table. If you are dealing with a situation where you don't feel there's any chance of failure, and then you don't ever worry about rolling the dice. But if there is a chance of failure, that would be my advice to you. Okay, it's the easiest way to resolve any situation is to fall back on that basic approach. Now, I hope that this was useful to you, and if it was, fantastic. If you have questions, put them into the comments section. If you have any feedback, please provide it now in the comments section. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. All right, I'm not gone. I just need to drink some water, and I'll go into chat, and then we'll see what people have to say, and then I'll go from there, and then we'll do some demonstration. All right, so here we go. Back to my face. No, I'm going to leave that here. I need it closer to me. Too far to reach otherwise. I'm going to need to drink a bit more water, I think. I've been talking for about half an hour, so... Okay, so how are we doing today, everybody? All right. Now, it is time to ask some questions. And feel free to... Look, I will answer questions outside of the basics that I just discussed today. But let's try to stay on track if we can. If we can't, we can't. Hashtag ask your questions. So I think what I want to also just mention is you need to be very specific with your question when you ask your question so that I don't get confused. It's very difficult from anybody who, if you write in shortened things and you leave stuff out, even though you understand what you're trying to communicate, I don't. So I need you to be very, very clear for me to be able to do this. Okay. If you can't comment in the chat, it's because you need to be subscribed to the channel for at least 20 minutes. So if you're not subscribed, just hit the subscribe button, wait 20 minutes. We're going to be here a while. Okay. I've got just under an hour and a half. So let's have a look at the poll. Are you new to Dungeons & Dragons 5e? Yes, 35%. Okay, out of 17 votes. So for those of you who are new, this is your opportunity if you are confused. Don't feel too bad if you're asking a question, you feel like you've asked a stupid question, because all I've done is given you a slideshow and explain stuff. But what I can do and what I will do is I will demonstrate to you using maps, miniatures, my black marker and my eraser. I will show you how it's done, so you're not confused. No, 47%. Good. Okay. Just watching 18%. Nobody's undecided. Okay. So Spirit Wolf, hello Spirit Wolf, welcome back. Some of you may require dice today. I don't know if I'm going to be getting you to roll dice or not. I think probably I will wind up rolling most of the dice. I think your part to play is asking questions for me to answer. Okay, and trying to get clarification, clarifying anything you don't understand. Hello Seeker, how's it going Seeker? Hulk smash, yes. Love the dice, that's right. Hulk smash. Nothing wrong with just smashing something. As long as it's yours. Seeker, we've had this discussion before. Next week, I will do the Dragonlance First Impressions. Okay, when it's available on D&D Beyond, I will do a First Impressions. I won't have had time to analyze it, but I will do a look at it, and I'll scroll through the whole thing if I have to, and have a look at the whole document. I don't know how long that'll take. I will schedule it for Friday next week in New Zealand, which means I will change that time if it becomes available sooner, and then I will bump one of the other classes to a different day. Yep, okay. So, yes, you've gone to the effort, as you know, and I know, everybody else doesn't. But yes, Dragonlance next week. Guaranteed, I will do it. Okay? Shiner81, hello, how are you doing? Jamie Marks, hello, Jamie, how are you doing? And what do we got here? Does everyone get a chance to counter after someone lands an attack? Okay, good question. Jamie, no. No, in fact, countering an attack is actually a separate mechanic. The idea being, Jamie, is that when you make an attack, your ability to try and stop something landing on you is represented by a static number, which is your armor class or AC. Okay? Your armor class and AC is determined a particular way. So, I guess the easiest way in terms of a calculation. Okay, good. You're good. Excellent. So the easiest way to understand the calculation for armor class is to look at what we are adding together. And there are only a couple of things we usually have to add together, but there are other things that can add on to it. So the first thing we're going to start with is we take the number 10. The number 10 always gets applied to your armor class, okay, or your AC. The next thing that you add is going to be your dexterity modifier. I don't know if I'm going to have space to write it all on here, but I'm trying. The modifier. Okay, then you'll have, if you're wearing armor, you will add your armor bonus. Okay, armor bonus. If you're not wearing armor, you don't have an armor bonus. If you are using a spell, there'll be a special formula that counts like armor, and it usually indicates how it's calculated. Probably the most confusing aspect of any kind of calculation with regard to Dungeons and Dragons that gets probably the most confusion is armor class. So let me just go over to my little stage here so that you can see what the heck I just was talking about. As I said, armor class is determined by a couple of different things, and that is 10, the number 10. Don't tell me why it's 10, it's just 10. Plus your dexterity modifier, whatever your dexterity modifier is, which is usually the small number, not the big number, okay? And then your armor bonus. Now on a character sheet like this, I'm going to pull down the wizard, for example. The wizard here is from the starter box set for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. This is with the Lost Mine of Phandelver. This particular wizard right now has an armor class of 12. I don't know if you can see that on here, but that says 12. Why is it 12? As I said, 10, and then we add the dexterity modifier. What is the dexterity modifier? On this character sheet, it is a +2. It's over here. The wizard is not wearing any armor, so therefore they only get a 12. 10 plus 2 is 12. Now, if I was using something like mage armor, the calculation for mage armor is different. Okay, instead of starting with a 10, we start with a 13. That means we take the number 13 and we add our dexterity modifier, which in this case is a 2. Okay, that would mean that the mage or this wizard, if it casts mage armor at the beginning of its day or starts its day, as it should do because it lasts 8 hours and you would be foolish not to do so, gets an armor class of 15, but only if they have mage armor cast on themselves. And then, of course, when we look at other classes, it gets calculated and worked out slightly differently again. If that is not enough explanation for you and you have a specific question around a specific class and how their armor class is determined, you'll let me know and I will come back to this. Okay, all right, so we kind of dealt with that. That's good. Let's move on to the next question here. Shiner 81, what do you got here? That was a good slideshow. Thanks. Got to go though. No problem, Shiner 81. And I'm glad that you liked the slideshow. The slideshow hasn't changed very much. I do expect that in the future it will have to change because they will update the rules, and therefore when they update the rules, that changes everything. So the slideshow will change as we get into 2024. If there are things about that slideshow that you find difficult or confusing, you will let me know so I can make adjustments. You understand now, Jamie? Good. Cool. All right. So I thought a good way of starting us out is to go straight into demonstration. Since there appear to be no questions, I'm going to just put down hashtag ask your questions, and then I'm going to go into demonstration, and I'll come back and we'll see if we've got any questions after that. Ask your questions. Even if you have questions that are related outside of the topic for today, I will do my best. So if you have a Dungeon Master question, I will answer those. I don't usually say no to answering the questions, not unless it's a really complicated one and I know I can't do it in this forum. I will not be able to, of course, answer every single question you have, but I will certainly try. Okay, so our first task for today is to give you an idea of what an ability check might look like. Remember I was talking about abilities and how you can make ability checks? So forget about all of the orcs here in the cave right now. We're not going to worry about that right now. What we're going to worry about is how would you go about making an ability check. One of probably the most common ability checks that you would make as a character, when you're playing a character, is you would make a stealth check if you were sneaking up in a cave. If you're coming up to a cave, you're probably going to make a stealth check, okay? And if you're smart, you're going to get the person who is the best at stealth to do it. And if you are even smarter, you'll probably make sure the whole group go with you and make a stealth check to ensure that nobody winds up getting crushed like a bug. Yep, because getting crushed like a bug is bad. So this is what we're going to deal with. Imagine our group is sneaking up to the cave. They're over here. We're going to make a stealth check. We don't necessarily have advantage unless your Dungeon Master states as such. But what we do have is an opportunity to do so as long as we're not seen and as long as the orcs don't turn around and notice us. If they can see us, we're probably in trouble. But if their backs are turned or we have something blocking our route, so we can move our characters over to the side if we wanted to, like so. Whoops. And they sneak around the bend here, just looking around the corner, and they're sneaking up to this location. How did the wizard get up the front? Over here. Right, this is it. There we go. There we go. All right. So we'll make a stealth check. Okay. And this is going to be using a contest because it's most commonly done as a contest. I'm going to make one stealth check for the rogue so you can see how it works. I'm using the rogue from the pre-made character sheet, the pre-made character sheet from the original starter set that has the Lostmon Fendelver at level 1. This is this sheet here. The number on here for stealth, okay, if you look, is a +7. So we take the 7 and we're going to add that to our 20-sided dice roll, whatever that might be. In this case, I'm going to roll it now. So I roll my dice and I get a 9. There's my 9. Take my 9, add it to the 7, and it comes to 16. So that's our result. In this case, if I'm a Dungeon Master, I don't want to roll a perception check to figure out if I notice or hear. So I won't be able to see the rogue or the party because they're not in view. But I might hear them or I might smell them if I have really good sense of smell. But it's probably more likely I'll hear them coming. So we look at our stat block for the orc. The Dungeon Master will look at that. They'll look for passive perception, which is a 10. So the PP is 10. Okay, which means that's the DC we're aiming for. Essentially, it's not a DC, it's a PP. It's a contest, Fred. Not a DC. Different sort of thing. So we succeed. We have to get equal to. We have to get greater than. We can't get equal to. We have to get greater than. To be successful, we need to get greater than. It's a contest in this case. So we succeeded. They did not hear us. At least the rogue is not detected. So that is basically not just an ability check, but it's specifically a skill check, okay, related to dexterity. Now, if we were to take this and say, okay, if we make another type of check to do something, what do you think would be appropriate in a situation like this where there is, say, a whole lot of blood on the ground, or we decide that probably the best way is we're going to maneuver through this location, and we're coming from a different route. Instead of coming from that route, we're going to take a different route. We're going to come through the back door. Now, if we come through the back door and our group move through the back door, we find that there's a big boulder in the way. So what do we do about the big boulder? Well, we want to move the big boulder. And so you might have your dungeon master might state, like, this is the time you're allowed to utilize a different type of check. I'm going to let you make a strength check. I would allow them to make an athletics check as well, because I feel like lifting something is actually a skill. You actually have to learn how to lift something correctly without hurting yourself. But a lot of dungeon masters usually just require a strength check. This is a type of ability check. Okay? And so what you would do is you would look at the various characters there, and if you're only getting one person to make that roll, that's fine, but it might be more appropriate if everybody tries to join in. So we get 3 people who can get in there and give it a good push. And the strongest person is probably the smartest person to make that roll. So if we have multiple individuals involved, we should be getting advantage. Our dungeon master should be allowing us to roll 2 dice. We don't get 3 dice to roll, not one for ourselves and then one for each other character helping us. Remember, advantage doesn't stack. But in this situation, if we're trying to push the boulder out of the way or pull the boulder out of the way, which we can attempt to do, probably the best way is to pick the individual who is the strongest and get them to have advantage on that roll. In this situation, the strongest individual just happens to be the fighter. And the fighter character that I'm using to determine this and for you is this sheet. And you'll notice that their strength modifier is a +3 on the character sheet. So that's the number I'm going to use. Okay? That's the 3. I'm not worrying about athletics, although that seems fair enough to me. We're just going to go with a strength check for right now. They get advantage because there are other people helping them. When you get some help, you get advantage. I roll the 2 dice. I take the highest result out of the 2. I rolled a 1 and I rolled a 10. So I take the 10, the highest number, and that is a 13. Now, the dungeon master will have already determined what the difficulty class is for moving the boulder. And it probably doesn't make sense that it's a 5 or a 10, because that would be easy or very easy. It's probably not a moderately difficult task. It's probably quite a hard task. So it's 20. That's what I needed to get. I needed to get a score of 20, so I fail. Now your question will be, can I reattempt the task? Well, probably no. If you needed to actually make a dice roll in the first place to do this, what you will find ultimately is that if you fail the first time, the boulder is simply too heavy for all 3 of you to do. Like that represents a significant amount of time. And so it's up to a dungeon master whether they allow you to retry. But this usually represents your full attempt. Okay? Otherwise, if you could reattempt the task, then there would be no point in actually making the check in the first place. You remember how I said we only make checks if there's a chance of failure. So if you can retry the task, there's really no point in actually rolling dice in the first place. Okay? Now, for those of you who are, and I think I have gone over this before, hello Fendar, how are you? Fendar is a patron and also a moderator. Thank you for showing up, Fendar. Lovely to see you again. Hello Leatherface, how are you? Would you roll disadvantage if there was a loud river flowing? Okay, so if you're so Leatherface, I'm assuming you mean with regards to sneaking up to a location. Would there be disadvantage for the orcs? Yes, if there's a lot of loud noise and it makes it harder for the orcs to actually hear you coming, and their sense of smell is not that great. Apparently orcs haven't necessarily got a particularly good sense of smell, but they would probably be able to hear you. Instead of their passive perception being a 10, I would apply disadvantage, which would be a -5, which means that the orcs' passive perception now drops down to a 5 as long as they can't see you. Okay? There's no way to see you, and they can only attempt to hear you, and their smell is not that great, sense of smell is not that great, then that's probably the easiest way to deal with that. So yes, you could. A loud flowing river would make perfect sense to apply disadvantage. But there's another option here too, Leatherface, and that is, what happens if the loud flowing river is so loud that it's impossible to ever hear anybody coming? What if the waterfall is so loud that it can never possibly be detected? You can't detect somebody by hearing them. I've talked about this before. Okay? So that would be another example. I want to present you with an older game mechanic. Now, I know I'm supposed to only be showing you 5e stuff, but what I want to do is I want to show you how older versions of the game would resolve a situation like moving a boulder or a portcullis. I think I've covered this before, but I'm going to do it again because I like covering it. That's just me. And what you would do is, instead of worrying about rolling dice, instead of worrying about using the ability modifier, so a strength modifier, we're not going to do that. Instead, what we do is we determine how many people can actually partake in trying to move the boulder. And the Dungeon Master determines what they think is a suitable DC to hit. When I say DC, I just mean a target number. So we're just going to call it target number. Okay? The target number is going to be quite high because it assumes that there's going to be a party involved to try to do this, and that one individual alone would not be successful. That multiple individuals would need to do this to be successful with regard to moving something that's heavy using a strength check. Okay, so I'm going to set my difficulty for moving this rock, okay, or my target number, this is an old mechanic, not a new one, as 40. That seems very high. And you're thinking, well, if we're not rolling dice, how do we figure this out? Well, what we do is every character that's involved in that process takes their strength score. This is where we actually use the number that almost nobody ever uses. There's a reason why in the past we had those numbers. So this fighter has a strength score of 16. So it's right there. It's the small number at the bottom there. Okay, right there. So I take that strength score and I add that to my pull because they're involved in pushing the boulder. I then look at the rogue, and the rogue has a strength of 8. See that? Strength of 8. It's a very small number there. It's not a lot, but 8. So they get to add their strength to it because they are involved in pushing the boulder. There's space. There's only space for 3 individuals. The last one is not going to be the wizard. It's actually the cleric. So the cleric is involved. Okay, so their strength in this case is actually a 14. It's right here at the bottom there. See there? Right there, 14. Okay, so I take that 14 and I add that on. So 14. Now I've set my target number quite high, have I not? So it means that it's very much dependent on how strong people are ultimately. It's as if you were exerting the maximum amount of force that our character is capable of doing so, okay, for whatever length of time it might be. So I take, I take the 16 and I take the 14 and I add them together. What do I get? So 16, 14, that's 20, 30, and then the 8, 38. So I get a total of 38, which is going to fail because I was 2 points out from the 40. So if the rogue had been a bit stronger, it would have been successful. This is one time where it starts to show, if you apply the rules in this way, dumping one of your stats is a bad idea. particularly if you're dealing with the older mechanics we used to use, which was basically a large target number and the group would be involved. Now you might say, well, is there no other way for the wizard to be involved? Now if the wizard had some sort of spell that could exert force on the boulder, or there was more space, and apparently there is a little bit of space on the side here. See, there's a little bit of space there. I'm allowing the rogue on the side two abreast. The space is 10 foot wide, so the wizard could actually get involved now. So now that changes things. With only the 3 of them, they would fail. But if all 4 of them get involved and there's space for them to fit, if there wasn't, they wouldn't do this. We can now use the strength score of the wizard, who has a 10 for their strength. That changes things, doesn't it? Because if we add 10 now, as you can see, that makes all the difference. That pushes us over the top. We will now succeed, okay? Because we now have 48 rather than 38. And so we succeed on our target number. This is an old mechanic. You do not need to use it in your game. It is not spelled out in any way, shape or form in 5e. I'm only showing you what has been used in the past. Okay. Hopefully that was helpful to people, or confusing. I don't know. If I made things worse for you, I don't. Possibly. Anyway, let me go back to chat. I see there's a few people speaking. Before I start demonstrating, say, an attack roll and a saving throw, because I think those are probably important that we do those 2 rolls as well. Okay. We have actually demonstrated quite a bit already. It's not top of the hour yet. I got 2 minutes before it's top of the hour, and then I will go in and we'll cover some of the, as I said, I will show you how to do an attack roll, and I'll show you how to do a saving throw and how that might apply. Yep. Okay. Cool. Right, where are we? So, question. Failed intention. Hello, failed intention. How are you? Welcome to the stream. Your question is, how does opportunity attack work and get resolved? Fair enough. Well, I think that's a demonstration. I could explain it, but I've explained opportunity attacks before. So instead of explaining it, how about I demonstrate it? Okay, it's fairly simple. Okay, let's do a demonstration for failed intention on a opportunity attack. So we'll go back to our map. I will get rid of this because that won't help me, not in this situation. I will move that out of the way, and we will set them up in a different sort of situation. Let's imagine that we actually have a fight taking place. We have our fighter in the front. We have our cleric standing here, and our rogue is there, and our wizard is standing behind. Okay. Oh, facing the wrong way. Whoops. There we go. And for whatever reason, the orcs have actually noticed them. So they're now coming in to actually attack them. So we've got a couple of orcs engaging them in battle. Right? That's our current situation. And yeah, we'll just leave it at that. This caster, whatever they're doing, doesn't matter. So you really use the opportunity attack when you try to leave a battle. Okay, it is only ever designed to be a response. It's a reaction that takes place when you decide to leave a battle without disengaging. So let me just show you what that looks like. Opportunity. Here we go. So we've got a whole lot of orcs in here, and the cleric, the fighter, and the rogue are fighting. And say the rogue gets smashed really badly, because orcs can do a lot of damage when they roll their dice. It hurts because it's a 12-sided dice, the damage dice. Okay, and instead of deciding to disengage for whatever reason, they simply move away as soon as you leave the threatened space. Okay, and right now it's close enough to be hit by this orc here and that orc there. There are 2 orcs that are within 5 feet of the creature of the rogue. So if the rogue steps back, it's going to provoke an attack of opportunity from both creatures. and that's the only time it occurs. Now, the rogue doesn't get to step back on their turn until the attacks from the orcs have been resolved. So how do those attacks look? And this is the only time that an opportunity attack comes into play. Your opportunity attack is only ever going to be a melee attack. It's not going to be a ranged attack. You can't use a ranged attack. It's got to be a melee attack. Okay, you need to see the creature that you're attacking with your opportunity attack. So if the rogue is invisible, then you can't do it. Okay, you have to be able to see them. So we'll take our great axe, and it's a 5 to hit. And how much damage? It's going to do a 12-sided dice plus 3. So when the rogue steps back, your Dungeon Master can now make an opportunity attack with both of these orcs, provided they haven't already done so during the round. You can only have one reaction per round. So make my attacks. I'm going to roll my attack down and dice first. I rolled a 20, which is a critical. It's bad. Very bad. When you roll a critical, like a 20 on the dice, that means it automatically hits. Doesn't matter that it comes to 25. It's going to hit. And instead of rolling just one of these 12-sided dice, I get to roll 2. So I'm going to roll 1. I got an 8 on that, and I roll it again. And I get another 8. Add that up. 8, 8, 16, and 3 is 19. So I do 19 points of damage, and probably the rogue is dead as a doorknob. But that's not the only attack that got through. Okay, one of the other orcs got an attack off as well, so they get to make an attack as well. This all gets resolved all at once. It's like it's all happening in fast in slow motion. So I make my 5. I roll the 5 plus 5 for the orc, and the orc only gets a 10. So that's going to fail because it has to equal the armor class or get greater than the armor class of the rogue. And the rogue has only got a 14. But 10 is way too low, so there's no damage done by the second orc. It won't matter because unfortunately the rogue will have probably gone down, I would imagine, and be on its face. That's a lot of damage to be taking at that level. Not necessarily dead, but certainly on their face, having a bit of a nano-nap. So that's how your opportunity attack works. If I had chosen with my rogue to disengage, I can use... With a rogue at level 2, you can disengage as a bonus action. Then I can use my movement to move away, and I don't provoke any attacks of opportunity through the entire movement phase, and then I can use my action to make an attack or do something else. Okay? Normal characters would have to use their action. So if it was the fighter who did it, they would have to use their action to actually use disengage, and then they would move, and that would be it. They wouldn't get to make an attack at all. So that's how your opportunity attack works in the game. Does that answer your question? You let me know. I'm interested to see if that covered what you were after. Just give me a second. I just need more water. I'm doing a lot of talking, and it's top of the hour, so I may go take a 5-minute break and then come back and answer this. Now, where are we? Where did we get up to? So failed intention. Did it answer? Thank you. Okay, failed intention. That helped. Good. Cool. Dungeons and Chronics. How do you figure out the arc target number for something? Okay. So Dungeons and Chronics, you're talking about the mechanic that I showed you before for older versions of the game. Yep. The target number from older versions of the game. The Dungeon Master makes it up. It's completely arbitrary. The concept behind the target number for older versions of the game was to force the characters to work together as a team rather than to have a superstar or superhero or a single individual who ultimately is the one who creates success. Older versions of the game were very heavy on working together resulted in success. And so a lot of the mathematics behind it was set up deliberately to force the players to help each other perform a task. So the number I created for moving that rock being 40, this is unrelated to 5e people, this is older versions of the game, that is just a number I made up. I could have made the number 50 if I wanted to. But 40 seems reasonable because what I want them to do is I want the characters to come to the conclusion that the only way to succeed is to work together. Now, another way of doing this in 5e is called the group skill check or the group ability check, where only half the group need to succeed and the other half can fail. It's a clever mechanic. I know some people don't like it, and I am certainly open to demonstrating it, but yeah, I just wanted to point that out. Fender, what do you got here? I've seen that in 5e in specific situations in Tomb of Annihilation. Besides that, that way is never referred to in the book. That's right. It is an old mechanic. It is never referred to in 5e's Player's Handbook. It is a very useful tool. So if you are wanting to make and force your players to work together, that will do it. Okay. I thought people might like it. I've shown it off before, twice because you rolled a d20. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So yes. So Jamie, the reason for me rolling twice with the 12-sided dice with the orc is because I actually rolled a 20. So a 20 is classified as an automatic hit, but it's also a critical. When you roll a critical like this, okay, when you roll that 20 on the dice, that means you get to double the dice. You don't double the amount of damage you do, you double the dice you roll. And so I would normally have to only roll one 12-sided dice. I rolled two 12-sided dice because I rolled that critical hit and I got a 20 on the 20-sided dice. Okay, so that's why I did it. Adjudicating DCs in 5e, did he? The target number for something. Okay, how about, look, let's have a discussion about target numbers and DCs for Dungeons and Dragons 5e. I'm more than happy to discuss that for sure, but I need to take a break. So what I'm going to do, that's good for you, Jamie? Okay, so that answered your question. Cool. All right, so we're under control here. I need 5 minutes or less just to go and take a toilet break. I will come back and then we'll answer your questions. I will actually, just before I do that, I will put in, ask me some more questions. This is your time. This is why this thing exists every week, is for asking questions. So don't be shy. You might as well ask your questions. Okay, just give me 5 minutes. Arnold Schwarzenegger will look after you, and I'll be back. Alright, I'm heading back in. Here we go. Oh, hang on, I almost forgot. I need to demonstrate DCs, don't I? And I actually have something that I can do that with. No. Ah, there we go. There it is. But the problem with showing you this is you're probably going to ask me where the heck you can find it. That's the only hassle that I can see with doing this, but well, we'll see how we go. Anyway. Alright, so bearing with me, I'm just getting back into the comfy spot and then I will switch back. Alright, I have returned. I have taken my small break. I am ready to deal with the next thing. Flanking. Does a creature get opportunity attacks if within reach? Yes. So yes, your question with regard Leatherface, if you are flanking, does a creature get an opportunity attack if they're within reach? Yes. If they move out of your reach, they still get opportunity attack. The problem with flanking and opportunity attacks is it's much worse for the creature who's leaving your reach. I suppose I can demonstrate that. I'll do that first, and then we'll come back to DCs. I think that's what you were aiming for. So let's go back to the battle mat, and I'll demonstrate what that looks like now. If you were to do something like that, okay? How's that sound? So flanking and opportunity attacks. Seriously bad idea. Like, you don't want to do that if you can help it. So let me set up a situation with the miniatures that sort of makes it look like this. So with flanking, when you have flanking, you get advantage on your D20 dice roll. So you, instead of rolling one 20-sided dice roll when you make your attack, you get to roll two. Okay? That represents you having advantage, better chance of actually succeeding. So let's have a look at what that might look like. We'll move these guys over here. And I'll rearrange the battlefield a little bit. I'll get rid of some people so it's not quite so cluttered, because right now it feels cluttered, doesn't it? And we'll set up a situation where there is flanking involved. Right now, I'll bring them further forward. How's that? That's better. You can actually see that a bit clearer now, I think. So our fighter here is flanked by the orcs. So this means if we decide to not disengage and we provoke an attack of opportunity and we move out of reach by just moving, one of those orcs, or potentially both of those orcs, depending on how far we move, gets to make an attack. So here's the thing though. If I move here, right, I've moved out of the reach of this orc. The attack takes place before I change my position. I haven't moved out of the reach of this orc here. Only this orc here gets to make the attack of opportunity. But because I have flanking, I get to have advantage. Because I'm not actually here when the attack takes place. I'm actually still here. I'm still in the same position. So you get to roll, orc gets to roll 2 dice. Take the highest result. I got a 2 and a 15, so I take the 15. And that's plus the 5 is a 20, so I hit. And then I roll my damage. It's not a critical this time. Thank God for that. And 2 plus 3, and do 5 points of damage. If I'm still alive and still up and not unconscious, I'm here. Okay? Now you're probably thinking, okay, so what happens if I keep moving? If I move around, I've moved 10 feet, and then I'm out of the reach of this orc here. Do I get advantage? Does the orc get advantage on me when I move away from this orc here? No, because they do not have flanking anymore. Okay? This one, yes. This one, no. Now, Dungeon Masters may adjudicate it slightly differently, okay, at their table, and consider that it all happens in the space of a moment, and that's fine. But usually, if I was adjudicating it, I would go with this one gets the one with advantage, as they move, as you move out of reach, and as you continue to move, this one will only get to make an opportunity attack with 1 dice d20 rather than 2, because they do not get advantage because you've already moved around them. Okay, so you make your dice roll, and in this case for that one it would be a 13 plus the 5, which is an 18, and that would probably hit the fighter, so it's a tickos, and we make our damage roll, okay? And I got a 12 on that one, so that's quite a lot of damage. 12 and 3, strength modifier is 15. Okay, so that's how flanking and opportunity attacks work. Is it possible for a situation to arise where I move away from both of them at the same time? Yes, it is. You could move this way, and now there's a space between both of them. Now, I'm not actually here when the attacks take place by both the orcs. I take the blows just before I leave that space. So then now both orcs get to attack me if I go that way. But if I go this way, no. Does that make sense? I think that answers your question reasonably well. If it hasn't, you'll let me know, and I will try to correct anything that I need to. Leatherface, you let me know if that was adequate for you. If someone is running away, can you get an opportunity attack with a bow and an arrow? Okay, so I've kind of had this question discussed before, so I think probably the best way for me to answer your question, and I do still have the DC chart with me that I could talk about shortly, people, so if you're wanting that, don't run away because I will cover it, okay? I think the best thing is I go to D&D Beyond and I pull up opportunity attacks so that you can see how this might work. Because I kind of have discussed this in the past. And I think the easiest way to understand this with opportunity attacks is it's going to kind of involve how your Dungeon Master views the rules and also adjudicates the rules. There's a lot of adjudication taking place here, okay? So not everything can necessarily be hard, baked in concrete sort of stuff. There is obviously the things that Jeremy Crawford intended or the design team intended, and then there's the things they didn't intend, of course. But let's just see if I can just move over. We're going to go over to D&D Beyond, over to the rules, and that should give us what we want. And I'll discuss that right now so that you've got a reasonable idea of what's going on here. So, first off, opportunity attacks. I think I'm going to have a lozenge. I'm getting a bit dry and a bit tired and not drinking enough water. It's not really helping, unfortunately, but that's all right. We'll get through this. Don't let me forget to show you how to figure out DCs and difficulty classes. It's very much a personal thing as a Dungeon Master, by the way. Okay, opportunity attacks. In a fight, everyone is constantly watching for a chance to strike an enemy who is fleeing or passing by. So you don't have to flee, you can just try to move past somebody. I could have had the fighter in the demonstration I just did move towards the spellcaster behind the orcs, or behind one of the orcs if I wanted to. But I didn't do that, but you could. Such a strike is called an opportunity attack. You can make an opportunity attack when a hostile creature that you can see moves out of reach. To make the opportunity attack, you use your reaction. So in other words, you're taking a reaction on somebody else's turn, usually the Dungeon Master's turn. Dungeon Master's turn is when they do their monsters and so forth. That's when you would get your opportunity attack. You have to make one melee attack against a provoking creature. You don't get to make any more, just one. The attack occurs right before the creature leaves your reach. Okay, that's why we were talking about flanking, about how that works. What you'll notice in the wording is it says one melee attack. It doesn't say one melee weapon attack. It just says one melee attack. What does that mean? That means we could punch them. You could literally, if you decided to, you've got no weapon in your hand, you could punch them in the face. Okay? Or you could kick them in the groin. How much damage would you do? Unless you're a monk, you're only going to do 1 point of damage plus your strength modifier. So it's not a lot of damage, but you don't have to have a weapon in your hand to do it. Okay, because all it says is one melee attack. It doesn't say one melee weapon attack. And the rules on D&D Beyond are as up to date as they possibly can be. So that's quite intentional. Okay. Having been part of real combat myself, I can assure you that you do not need to have a weapon to be able to attack somebody who's trying to move away. Okay. The next thing is, well, if I'm going to use my bow, a bow isn't a melee attack, is it? Correct? A melee attack is used with a melee weapon or with an unarmed strike. That would be a melee attack. So if I'm going to use a bow or an arrow that's in my hand, so I'm going to strike somebody with my longbow because I've got a longbow in my hand, I'm using both hands to fire the bow, I could try and whack them with it. How does that look though? Well, as a dungeon master, they might roll, this would be an improvised attack, and that would be very appropriate. So I'm now making an improvised attack with my bow. There is a chance, of course, that I might break the bow in the attempt to try to smack somebody with it. Now, if a dungeon master says, look, if you roll a 1 on your attack roll, you snap the bow, and you're willing to do that, that's fine. They don't have to do it that way. There's no rules about that or anything like that in the game, okay? So how do I make an attack with a bow that's for an opportunity attack that's going to be melee? Well, you're going to be making that attack without proficiency, okay? It's just going to be your strength modifier for the attack, okay? That's what you're going to roll for your attack roll. Attack roll, 20-sided dice, strength modifier. No proficiency, because you're not proficient in whacking people with your bow. So we leave that alone. How much damage do we do? Well, normally an improvised attack, as stated in the player's handbook, is 1 4-sided dice, a D4. Unless, of course, the dungeon master thinks the weapon or the thing that you're holding, that you're using as an improvised weapon, could scale up. Otherwise, all you're going to do is a 4-sided dice worth of damage plus your strength modifier. Now, you're probably thinking, well, can I use my dexterity for the damage instead of my strength? Well, the bow was never designed to be used as a melee weapon unless you've got a specialized weapon, okay? It was always used to be for firing arrows. I guess the next question is, what if I don't have a bow, but I just have an arrow in my hand? Can I use the arrow to make an attack? Yes, but then what is the dungeon master going to do in terms of how that works? Are you going to be doing piercing damage instead of bludgeoning damage with your bow when you strike them? Well, you're probably only going to be doing like 1 point of damage with your arrow as you try to stab them with it. Or is it going to be 2? Will it be a D4? I mean, that's going to be up to the dungeon master to adjudicate. So yes, you could potentially, if you wanted to try, smack somebody with your bow and make a melee attack as an improvised weapon without your proficiency bonus to make the attack, with a potentially a chance, I guess, if your dungeon master wants to do that, of breaking your bow as well. Or you could just punch or kick them instead. So, yes. Does that answer the question? I hope it does. And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, it didn't. And we'll move on. Let me just go back to the chat. Okay. Dungeons and Chronics, was that clear? And Leatherface, you're happy with that explanation? Okay, good. Okay. So DCs. Somebody who was asking me about determining DCs. So there's a reason why Wizards of the Coast has created a system with no DCs. They have decided ultimately that whatever they made up in the past, people were changing anyway. It also meant they needed to have a lot of additional tables to tell you stuff, and you can never cover every single eventuality. That's part of the reason why they've done it. Okay. I got that, Dungeons and Chronics. Great. So all they do is they give you a scale. 5 through to 30. 5 being very easy, and 30 being near impossible, but not impossible to perform. Anything above 30 doesn't exist. If you try it, okay, it's impossible to perform. You fail it. If it's higher than 30, you never get to roll dice. Okay, that's kind of how 5e is set up. For me as a dungeon master, I never bother with a 5. A task that is very easy is not something that we should bother rolling dice for. Not because it has no meaningful result or consequences to it, but because it is very easy to perform. A very easy task is like brushing your teeth. Okay? Do we need to have you roll a 20-sided dice to brush your teeth? No, because you've been doing brushing your teeth for a very long time. You know how to do that. You don't need to roll a dice for that. Okay. A DC 10 check, which Wizards of the Coast uses a lot and pisses me off quite a lot, I have to say, Frank. I'm not going to say Frank. Otherwise, we need to change my name from Fred to Frank. Otherwise, I'm franking everything. 10 is an easy task. Again, why would we bother rolling for that task? Because it's easy. An easy task would be I go and put some cereal in my bowl, pour some milk in there, and add a bit of sugar, and then I eat it. That's an easy task. Yeah? There's a few more things involved, a bit more complicated than brushing my teeth, but it's still not that hard. Do you know what I mean? Or tying my shoelaces. Like, that's an easy task. Now, maybe not an easy task if you're a 1-year-old, but it's an easy task. Okay, we're dealing with adults here playing in an adventure game. And we don't usually have bubbers running around in our fantasy worlds, okay, who are 1-year-old. So really, I feel like the only DCs that actually matter is anything that's 11 or higher. And even for me, I think, frankly, I'm saying Frank again, saying a 15 or higher is probably the range we want to work with. So I would say a 15 through to a 30. Those are the numbers we worry about. Otherwise, that's what I would suggest. That's what I do. If the numbers are lower than a 15, I probably don't want to bother. I don't do a 5, and I generally don't like a 10, so I don't bother with them. And I never have a DC that's higher than 30. Okay, now that I've said all that, I did promise to show you something that might help you figure out your DCs or difficulty classes. This is probably going to be more useful to you if you are a dungeon master than a player. Please don't expect me to be able to show you or explain where to find this resource, because I got this a long time ago and I've had it for ages, like since 2014. Yeah, it'd be very, very difficult at this point to actually grab a hold of it. So I can't do that. Okay. So yes, I know that's not necessarily very helpful to you, but this. Do you recognize that? That is essentially a series of tables for the different ability scores or different abilities. Okay, so transition over. It's very old, so you're probably not going to be able to see the writing, but I will read from it. We have a section on strength. What is classified as moderately difficult, automatic success, easy. Is that automatic? Yeah, automatic success, easy, moderately hard, hard, very hard. Near impossible is not even on here. Okay. One for dexterity, constitution, one for intelligence, one for wisdom, and one for charisma. This is not in the player's handbook. It is not in the Dungeon Master Guide. So you can't access it that way. So because you can't access it, what I will do is I will read from it and give you an idea of sort of roughly some of the numbers you might want to work with. These are not set in concrete, people. These are just suggestions. This is not created by me. This is created by somebody else in the community who made this a long time ago. So they decided on what they thought was suitable. Yeah. So going through this fairly quickly. Will that help if I take the glasses off? It will. So I'll take the glasses off. So strength. If we were dealing with something like athletics, they have listed down the following things that they think should be automatic success, no dice roll. Climbing a wall with plenty of handholds, or a secure knotted rope, or a rope ladder. So if you've got a rope ladder, you've got a piece of rope that's got knots along it, or you've got plenty of handholds, it's easy. It's automatic success. They're going to be able to climb it, no problems, okay? Swimming in relatively calm water. I'm sure that most of you have been able to do that without having to worry about rolling a 20-sided dice in real life. Jumping a number of feet horizontally equal to half your strength score. It's actually tied into the main rules already, if you didn't know. Or if you are making like you're taking your strength score with a 10-foot jump, okay, running jump, to jump over something, you can cover that distance without making a dice roll. That's actually in the rules under the jumping rules, okay? So they've included that. Leaping into the air a number of feet equal to half of, so that's again, it's the same sort of thing. So I'll just say, now easy tasks. These are things that I think, personally, I wouldn't even bother with. That's a DC 10, easy. I wouldn't even bother with these, but this is sort of to give you an idea of what they've put together. Climbing a wall lacking adequate amounts of handholds. Treading water in rough conditions. Jumping a few feet further than you normally could. Okay, so then we'll make a dice roll for that. Clearing an obstacle such as a low-lying hedge or a wall of whatever specific height based off something. So a very low wall, those are things that are easy tasks. This is athletics. So a moderate check, which would be a DC 15, would be the following: climbing a rope dangling from a protrusion or overhang, lacking any kind of bracing on a vertical surface, or swimming in rough water against a mild current. So if there's a current and it's quite rough, then now we're making a dice roll and the DC is about 15. A hard check for athletics would be represented by a DC 20, and this is going to be climbing a wall with very few handholds, catching yourself on a rope or other handholds in the middle or at the end of a long jump. So if you fail the jump and you reach out, you grab on. Swimming in violent water or against a strong current. Okay, so those would be hard tasks. A very hard task. Climbing a slippery or sheer wall with little or no handholds. Climbing vertically along an overhang with adequate handholds. Swimming in stormy waters. So that's very hard as a 25. So that's what they have listed. It's not going to be perfect, but it's good. It's there to give you a guide. Okay. Now you've said here, Dungeons and Chronics. What about getting out of quicksand? So you as the Dungeon Master look at the task, and based on your scale, you decide in real life, how hard do you think that task is? If we think about real quicksand, how easy it is to get out of quicksand if you're on your own without assistance. If you have assistance, the chances are you can get out of quicksand with no problems. If somebody throws you a rope and pulls you out, you're probably fine. Yeah? At that point, it really doesn't matter. You probably don't need to worry about rolling dice to determine that. But if you're trying to get out of quicksand on your own, that's a very, very different situation, is it not? And it also depends on how deep it is, but quicksand can be quite deep, can it not? So that means if there's a chance of actually sinking and going down, well, it's probably not going to be an easy task. It's not going to be a very easy task. Is it a moderately difficult task? Well, it's probably sitting in the moderate to hard to very hard task. I have never been trapped in quicksand myself. I've been stuck in mud before, okay, deep mud, and that was exhausting and was extremely hard for me to do. It took me a long time to get myself free. So if we count that as like quicksand, then maybe the DC should be sitting in the DC hard to very hard, which is a 20-25. But really, ultimately, it's up to you, Dungeons and Chronics. If you are the Dungeon Master gets to decide what that number should be. Yeah? Does it make sense? Hopefully it does. I hope it does. What else have we got here? I mean, I could read out a lot of this stuff. I just don't know that I necessarily. If people want me to read and go over more of this, you'll let me know in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to demonstrate how to make an attack roll. Okay. I mean, I kind of already have. I mean, I've made an attack roll as an opportunity attack with the orcs, but we haven't done a saving throw. So I think maybe a saving throw would be nice to perform as well. Do you know what I mean? So you'll let me know in the chat if we want to do that. Otherwise, I want to do a saving throw for the next thing that we do. Oh, pardon me. Saving throws. Saving throws. All right, we've got a saving throw. Just about ready for my saving throw, and now probably the most common time you're making a saving throw is when you're dealing with a spell. If somebody decides to cast a spell, you probably wind up having to make a saving throw. Not always, but you know, sometimes. Right, so here's a good example of a saving throw. Hellish Rebuke. It's a dexterity saving throw. So let's use that one. Because we have an orc shaman, so I think that would probably be a good example in this situation. Let us spill on over to saving throws. Here we go. Saving throws. So we have our fighter pinned by two orcs. The rest of the group are fleeing or behind, or maybe they're over here. It doesn't really matter. They're doing whatever they're doing. Okay, so there's our characters. That's how our situation's set up. And we have a caster over here, and they decide they want to cast Hellish Rebuke. Now, why would they be casting Hellish Rebuke? Because it's a reaction, and probably because the wizard has moved into position and they have attacked them. Okay, so how Hellish Rebuke works is you point your finger, and the target that damaged you, so magic missile just hit our caster over here, okay, that damaged you is momentarily surrounded by hellish flames. So in other words, our wizard just made themselves a prime target for Hellish Rebuke from our spellcasting orc. The creature must make a dexterity saving throw, or it takes 2d10, so that's two 10-sided dice. If I have two 10-sided dice, that would be awesome. We'll get rid of that dice there. And we'll grab another 10-sided dice. I believe I have one more floating around. Yes, I do. There's another one. Okay. So there's going to be some damage involved. And this is probably going to hurt. I'm going to say the saving throw from our orc here is a DC 13. Okay, so DC 13. I'm just making this number up. That's probably what you would have at about level 1. Okay, if you're dealing with level 1 characters, you're probably dealing with a creature that has basically a 13, unless you're going for a bit tougher creature. So you're going to take 2d10 damage if you fail, and half as much damage if you succeed. So our wizard needs to make a dexterity saving throw. So we look at our character sheet for the wizard, and our wizard has a dexterity saving throw. You can see it's right there under dexterity, right there. This is it. This is this pre-made character sheet from the starter set. The +2. So I take the 2. I get no bonuses to it. I've got no bonuses involved at this present time. And I roll a 20-sided dice to determine the result. So I rolled a 6. 6 and 2 is 8. So I failed. You needed to get equal to or greater than. And with a DC, you need to get equal to or greater than. I failed that. So I take all the damage from Hellish Rebuke as the orc shaman or wizard or warlock or whatever the heck you want to call them blast you. So that's 2 8-sided dice worth of damage, coming to 16 points of damage. And if this was a first level wizard, it is probably dead as a doorknob because I only have 8 hit points, and I just took double that. So our wizard is engulfed in fire and burnt to a crisp, and we'll make a tasty snack later on once everybody has been defeated. So that's how you would go about performing a saving throw. So you have a creature casting a spell, and whoever's affected by that spell makes the saving throw. If you're dealing with a hazard, then whoever's dealing with the hazard has to make the saving throw. If you're dealing with something else, whoever's affected is the one who makes the saving throw. Okay, it's a relatively simple way of looking at it. Okay, hopefully that answered that question and gave you a decent demonstration as well. Okay, so you need a bigger rolling space. I simply don't have a big enough desk to make that happen. Not to mention, I have a webcam attached to a shelf in my office, which actually, my 4K monitor, which is about 30 inches, is just underneath that shelf. And then I have a slider for the camera that can slide back and forth because the thing is so big. It needs to be on a slider. And it's got a pivot as well. So, yeah, I can't lift the webcam that I'm using that looks at my desk high enough. If I did, it would get in the way. Maybe in the future I'll find a tool that allows me to do that, but right now I can't. You have to go, Fender. I'll see you later. He's probably already gone. Now, so I have covered attack rolls, saving throws, a skill check, an ability check. Nobody's requested that I go over DCs. I feel like maybe this is a good point for me to close off for today, unless there are people who have additional questions they would like to ask. Otherwise, I think this is a good point to stop for today, just so I save myself. Tomorrow, what is happening tomorrow, people? Tomorrow, I am talking about the Light of Xeraxis. This is the adventure for Spelljammer. It will have spoilers in it. Do not think that I'll be talking about an adventure and it would not have spoilers. So it's almost all of that whole book is all about the Dungeon Master. So if you're a Dungeon Master and you're wanting to see what the book is in the book, I'm going to show you everything in the book so you can see it. You don't have to trust me. I will show everything to you. Okay. And then I will analyze and give you my perspective and my opinion of the product based on what I've seen, and I've been reading the adventure as well. It's small enough to do so in a timely manner, so that's definitely something I've been doing. Often I will just skim over something, but I've been reading this like page for page, everything, to just have a better understanding of that adventure. So I'm going to be doing that tomorrow, and that will be the end of the week for me, and then I will hopefully get a day off before we come back doing this all over again. So I think this is a good point to sign off, and I have answered all the questions that I really needed to, I think, in my opinion. So I just want to thank all of the patrons who support me on Patreon that allow me to keep running this program every week. This is a weekly program that looks at the core rules for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, to explain the rules to you, but to also demonstrate to you and answer your questions. Okay, that's what it's there for. The best way to support it is on Patreon or Super Chats and Super Stickers. But Patreon I would prefer because you get more from Patreon. If you're a player, you're probably not going to get quite as much, but yeah. In any case, I want to thank the patrons. I want to thank everybody who's been part of this live stream and showed up for the live stream. I do appreciate it. I know for some of you it's very early in the morning, and I want to thank everybody who's been watching the replays of the live streams, not just showing up to live streams and watching and commenting, and also watching my edited videos and my shorts. I know my shorts can be a bit of a pain in the ass, but I have to do them, otherwise YouTube doesn't really like me very much. So that's the deal. And so wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.